Welcome, I'm Paul, this guy here. This is Dave, my co-host. Today I have 14 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. My favorite one is actually just on how it makes me feel. I get different vibes when I'm narrating it. Even if you read a story just, in your head, it doesn't feel the same. But anyways, it's a last story involving a warehouse. We'll get to it. Case file number 3351, written by Midnight Mystique 01. When sleep can't explain it. My high school friend and I lived in the same hostel and attended the same college. One night, as I was unwell, I called her and said I won't be going to class the next morning, so she could leave without me. We talked for a while about some college stuff, and then I hung up. For context, I am a night owl, so in no way was I feeling sleepy. Just to be sure, I sent her a message saying the same. The next day, when I was hanging around in her room, I mentioned the phone call, and she said she never talked to me. She told me she had been asleep at that time. I was confused and insisted that we had spoken, as I remembered it clearly. But she said the call must have connected to someone else. I said that's not possible, because I recognized her voice clearly, and we talked about things only she would know. I even suggested that she might have been talking in her sleep, but then her roommate, my cousin, chimed in and said no, my friend was absolutely asleep the entire time. She had seen her, and she definitely didn't talk in her sleep. At this point, I was completely shocked and confused. I opened my call logs to show her the call, but to my disbelief, the call had connected to my friend, but the duration was only 0 seconds. And yet the message I sent right after the call was still there. To this day, I have no explanation. I genuinely feel like I talked to a version of my friend from a parallel timeline. So you did call in this universe. It was registered in your call log, but only lasted for 0 seconds. So I think that just means it was answered and then immediately cut. At the point of cutting, could the signal, have connected to a parallel universe where indeed your friend was awake and talked to you? And as long as the differences are minor, then the conversation would just flow as if it was the real, they're all real versions of her, but the one in this universe. It seems to be the most likely explanation to me because I do think information passes between the multiverse membranes, whatever you want to call it, the separation between universes. I don't think the picture of one universe being, in like an ocean that separates, or like voids that separates the multiverse. I think they're much closer and compacted onto each other. It probably has to do with dimensions and things we can't even visualize. Trying to visualize a tesseract or the dimensional space in Interstellar where, not to spoil anything, but it involves higher level thinking than we can even, it's almost like trying to imagine a color that doesn't exist. You can't do it. It's literally outside of the scope of our brain. So, needless to say, I think information can pass between these membranes much easier than physical matter can. Case file number 3352, written by Kate Always Late, Singing at the Close. I worked as a CNA part-time, mainly in the Alzheimer's unit, while attending university. There was a woman, let's call her Edith, down one of the units that I frequently worked down, who was unable to walk by herself and required assistance from 2 CNAs. While waiting for the overnight shift CNAs to arrive, we checked all rooms to ensure the clients are safe and sleeping. One night, we walked into Edith's room, and she was crouched upon her nightstand, which was probably 3 feet tall. She slept in a bed that was lowered all the way to the floor because she was a fall risk. She was just squatting atop her nightstand and staring at me. Probably the most creepy thing I saw in the nursing home. There was also a woman at this same nursing home who would sing this children's song, I didn't recognize it, in the days leading up to someone dying in the unit. People died quite often, so maybe it was just coincidence, but she only seemed to sing the song in the days immediately prior to someone's death. Did she know when they were departing the mortal coil? I think there are a lot of events that happen near death. Maybe they do have to relate to quantum mortality. Again, this is just information traveling between the multiverse. So, There could be signs or reverberations in the atmosphere itself. I think cats especially pick up on this, dogs do, although that could just be related partially to being able to smell different types of diseases, cancers and stuff like that. Pretty remarkable. That's not a glitch or anything, that's just incredible physiology. But in terms of death, I do believe there are signs that certain people can pick up on, perhaps when you're open to it, perhaps when you're close to death yourself, or at least closer than others. But not the finality of it. It's not the permanent deletion of your save file. It's just a transfer. And that transfer leaves traces. Case file number 3353, written by Anonymous. 3 days I'll never forget. I have a few experiences to report on. I was driving home from college one weekend. It was probably around 2 in the morning. It was my first time coming home by myself, so I was not entirely sure where I was going. The stretch of highway I was on was 2 lanes both ways. I was about 30 minutes into my 4-hour drive when I started to doze off. Trying to keep myself awake, I opened the windows and stuck my hand out and blared the music. Unfortunately, this did not help. I fell asleep at the wheel. I have been known to go into an autopilot mode while driving, but this was not that. I was passed out, hands not on the steering wheel. I woke up the next morning, soaking wet. When I finally opened my eyes, I noticed I was at a dead stop at a stop sign, car still idling with my foot on the brake. I considered myself very lucky to not have had an accident. Not knowing where the hell I was, I tried my best to find my way back to the highway. After filling up with gas, I asked for directions to Route 100. He said it was over 5 miles from here. Second one. I stayed out at school one summer to make some extra money. I worked every day from 8 to 7 at a restaurant. Needless to say, I was always dead tired when I would come home. I rented an apartment during the school year that I would normally share with 3 other roommates, but they had all gone home for summer, as well as most of the renters in the complex. One night, I stayed up a little later watching some documentary on ghosts. I don't believe in them, but it was enough to put me over the edge since I had never lived by myself before. And fluck me, during the commercial break, a PSA came on with that eerie screeching noise. Notice, be on the watch for an escaped convict. He was last seen on a street 2 blocks from my house. Now, I'm not the biggest guy around, but I usually have a deeper voice. The high-pitched squeal I let out, if in fact the convict was close, would have scared him off from entering any of the local residences. In my state of panic, I went around the house and turned on all the lights. As I went downstairs, I saw a person sleeping on my couch. This remains the only time I have peed my pants as an adult. I went over to go attack him, only to notice it was one of my friends who had come in drunk from a bar and didn't want to wake me. Last quickie. My friends and I heard about this haunted covered bridge where a woman ended her 2 kids, then herself, back in the 40s. We went down to check it out. When we got there was a woman and 2 kids walking through the tunnel. Probably there for the same reason we were, but it was getting dark, and enough of us were already scared that we decided to run away screaming. In the end, it was more funny than anything because we let the hype get to us. But holy fluck, the way the kids were laughing just creeped us the fluck out. Case file number 3354, written by Mr. Luke. When time skipped a turn. I was driving to meet my parents somewhere, and I knew they were driving at the same time because I'd just spoken to them on the phone, and as I got to a roundabout junction, I saw their car pass in front of me, which surprised me because they shouldn't have been there so quickly, based on where they just left from. And clear as day, I saw my mom in the passenger seat, as that was the window closest to me, and then I turned to follow the road they went down. I was gonna ring them to be like, "I'm behind you," but I thought, nah, I'll just get there at the same time with them and surprise them, in that we somehow met up at the same random point. But as I traveled down the road, I realized I couldn't see their car any longer, as they would have been 2 or 3 cars in front of me, so I thought maybe they just took a different turning or something and I missed it. But then I got to the location and wondered where they were, so I rang them, and they only just left their home like 5 minutes ago. So we're nowhere nearby at all. Not yet. But I saw my mom in the car. I swear to God. Case file number 3355, written by Freebird V. Across the Fields. When I was a young girl, I am 40 now, so late 90s, I was at an event with my family in the middle of rural England. One of the ladies my family knew was there, chatting with the adults. Myself, my younger brother, and a few other kids decided to run off and explore. Think vast fields surrounding us, nearest village a few miles away. We went to play, and about an hour later, I saw the same lady hiking through one of the fields. Even as a youngster, I found it odd that she would have had to leave the event at the same time as us, and I specifically remember leaving her with the adults. An older lady wouldn't want to come and play with kids anyway. My brother also saw her, as did the other children we were with. We ran back to the adults, which took around 10 minutes, and there she was, sitting in a camping chair with a drink in her hand, exactly as we had left her. At first, the adults didn't believe us, but we must have made them realize that we were not playing, and it went very quiet. It was 100% her walking through that field. I will never forget it. She was in the same outfit. There was no way she could have got further than us without us seeing her, and then make her way back. Bizarre. I still think about it every month. I don't have any answers for you, but I will say that the human brain is a funny little thing, and there's lots to this life that we are not aware of. Case file number 3356, written by Mr. Crossy. The Cat, the Kitchen, and the Copy. About 3 days ago, I was finishing my workout session from the gym and I went straight home. It was a little bit late, around 10:30 p.m., and on the way home, gym's nearby so I'm walking back on foot, I came across a stray cat that's pretty friendly and, from the looks of it, hungry. It followed me, and I thought, why the hell not feed it? When we arrived home, I saw my brother through the kitchen window. I was going to ask him to bring me the cat food, or any meat he could find in the house, because if I leave the cat alone even for a minute, it might leave. But since my brother was eating at the time, I didn't want to bother him. So I let the cat inside the hallway and left it there. The first thing that came across my mind was to return the weightlifting belt that I borrowed from my brother, so I went to his room real fast. As I opened the door, I thought the room was empty, and I just threw the belt on the floor. Well, it was in fact not empty. My brother, startled from the noise, instantly woke up. I turned on the light, and I asked him, "Did you just go from eating to sleeping in literally half a minute?" I was already a little bit shocked, even scared, because I knew that's already impossible. Man, he could barely open his eyes, let alone speak. I immediately realized he was sleeping for a while, this was no joke, so I apologized for waking him up and just left the room. As I was going through the hallway, my heart was pounding. I knew I saw my brother crystal clear in the kitchen a minute ago. So as I'm entering the kitchen in panic mode, there was no one at the table. There wasn't even food on the table that I saw him eating, nor the plate that was in front of him. The shirt I saw him wearing was the same shirt he wore that day. There was no one in the kitchen. So I thought maybe that was my mother who was sitting instead. There's no other explanation. She was in the room next to us with the door open, watching a TV show. I went there and I asked her, "Were you in the kitchen a few minutes ago?" She said, "No, I wasn't. I heard you enter the house, but there was no other noise in the past hour." There was no noise coming from the kitchen at all. That was a moment I was truly scared, although very curious too. My thoughts were all over the place that night. I slept with my lights on. And before anyone asks, it didn't stop me from feeding the stray cat. The day after I told my bro everything, he just laughed at it. But I know what I saw. I am 100% sure. Case file number 3357, written by Spare Invite 8191. The Roadside Loop. This happened when I was a teenager, around 17. I was walking to the end of my street where the bus would pick me up every morning. It's a main road where there are frequent cars that pass by, so people don't typically walk on it. No sidewalks, rural suburban area. As I got closer, I noticed a man on the other side of the road just standing there. It was dark outside, and I couldn't see who it was very clearly. I assumed it was one of our neighbors, so as I approached him, I shouted to him, "Hi!" But he didn't respond. He just kept staring blankly at nothing in particular. I made it to the end of the road, and I could make out his appearance more clearly. He was not someone who lived in my neighborhood, and with me being a teenage girl, I was rightfully nervous. I saw my bus in the distance, so I thought even if it was some serial killer, they would have been caught if they tried to harm me. I don't know my logic. So I stayed put. The man then turns and starts walking towards me, looking at me dead in the face with the most blank expression. I started screaming. Still no reaction from the man. He makes it to about 6 feet away from me, when all of a sudden, the bus flies past my stop, and the man completely vanishes. My heart was beating out of my chest, and I was in total shock at what had just happened. Before I could even collect my thoughts, here comes my bus again, driving the same direction I had previously seen it drive before. It pulls up to my stop, and I get on the bus and continue my day, as if nothing even happened. Case file number 3358, written by Trampolini69. A memory split in two. I'll tell the story from my friend's perspective, then mine. Her perspective. My friend stopped me in the hall between classes one day, right before last period, and asked me to drop off her handwritten essay to the English department since she was headed the opposite way and had to be at a track meet immediately after school. I guess I took the essay and said sure, and that was that. My perspective. At the end of that day, when my friend stopped me as I was going home and asked if I turned her essay in, I was not sure what she was talking about. She told me the above story. I said something like, "That's really weird because I didn't see you in the hall before last period, nor did you stop, talk to me, hand me the essay, or ask me to turn it in for you." She thought I was joking. I said no, I literally have no recollection of this interaction. I told her I wouldn't have agreed to turn in her essay either, as my last period class was not in the direction of the English department. This started a huge fight, as the essay was handwritten, so there was no record of it, meaning my friend had to rewrite the entire thing. This is what she was so mad about. We never got to the bottom of it, but interestingly enough, an earlier draft of the essay was found on the back of the English classroom. Not the final version that she gave me, but a draft nonetheless. She didn't talk to me for a good week after, which I honestly don't blame her, cause genuinely, what the fluck was that? Anyway, we are still best friends, but be warned, if you bring up the missing essay story, there's a 99% chance we will still have a disagreement over it because we each wholeheartedly believe we experienced something different from what the other did. Case file number 3359, written by Malvero, the poem I shouldn't have known. About 10 years ago, my family moved out of the house I had lived in since I was born and into the house that we currently live in. My little brother and I have always experienced strange stuff in the old house, and even though we didn't discuss it until recently, it's kind of eerie that everything strange stopped after we moved out. Not really supernatural, but I used to sleepwalk a ton in that old house. My dad would find me wandering around the hallways in the middle of the night. I would go to sleep and wake up in another part of the house in the dark, etc., etc. My parents told me that when I was 4 or 5, I got up in the middle of the night, headed to the dresser, and started packing my clothes. When they asked me what I was doing, I told them that I was leaving. Then they claimed that I started reciting this Chinese poem, and they have no idea where I could have learned it. My brother mentioned that he used to see silhouettes and something he called the Rainbow Man, more like a chromish see-through figure, when he sat in the upstairs bathroom and left the door open so he could see out into the hallway. I also had 3 recurring dreams that stopped when I moved out of the house. In the first one, I would go downstairs and everything would be foggy or monochrome, and there would be several all-black burnt figures sitting on the sofa. In the second one, I would go upstairs and the master bedroom would be completely cleared except for some figures kneeling over something on the floor in the corner. In the third one, there would be some entity, ghost, or demon and her child that would come randomly out of the walls, and that one was actually the worst. No concrete evidence, just scary crap that happened and stopped after I moved out. I'm actually a fan of horror movies and games, and actively search for scary movies to watch and games like Amnesia and Fatal Frame to play. But damn, old house was flucked up. Case file number 3360, written by Phil McCron. Distilling a chemistry glitch. I work in the chemistry department of my university. At the time, I was preparing for the next week's labs, and I was just finishing up. All I had left was to set out the waste containers. For one of the labs, I had to make a new waste container. This one we don't use often, so it is kind of special that I had to make a new one. Even the label looks unique for it. I so vividly remember making it. So, I set out all the waste containers for the labs, and the special one I made no longer has a label on it. It was like a brand new container without the label. These labels are not easy to come off. I usually have to soak them in hot, soapy water and scrape with a blade to remove the label. I was dumbfounded. To make sure I actually made the label, I retraced everything I did. I found the scraps of paper from cutting the label, and even the document was pulled up on my computer from printing it. I looked literally everywhere in the building. I checked every lab. Nowhere. I told my boss and told her to keep an eye out for it. She never found it. Since then, the semester has come to an end, and we are now cleaning all the labs. We have still not found it. Like it completely disappeared. I really do not know what happened. Case file number 3361, written by DBJD BWEVEJ, the Shein Anomaly. I had a very distinct purple toothbrush that I bought from Shein. It had white and purple bristles. I was looking for it and found it in a toiletries bag, where I usually put it. The next day, I was brushing my teeth as normal, and when I was looking through my bag, I found my toothbrush, which was odd because I just used it and put it in my toiletries bag. I picked it up and went to check the bag, and there were two. I had two identical toothbrushes, except I had blinged out with lots of rhinestones, so I had one with and one without. I had been using this toothbrush for months, so there is no possibility that there ever were two, because even if there were, I would have noticed that it sometimes didn't have rhinestones. Both of the places where I found them were places I usually put it. I slept at a friend's house a lot back then. There is no way there were ever two of them, from Shein, and I, all of a sudden, would have put the one without rhinestones at a place where the one with rhinestones always was. I think I didn't think about it much because I was scared, but now that I think about it again, it's the weirdest thing that has ever happened, and I have no idea how to explain it. And also, I live in a quite small city in Sweden, so there's no big stores here. Ones that also somehow could have had a copy of that exact same toothbrush. Case file number 3362, written by Definitely Not Miranda. The Ring Touched. My friend Sarah was at my house the other day. We were just hanging out, listening to music. She picked the ring up off my nightstand and said, "Oh, this is so pretty. You should let me borrow it." I told her of course she could borrow it, and that was that. We hung out for about another hour or so, and then she went home. That night, I was feeling around on my end table for my medicine container. I'm blind, just for context. I can't see at all, so I do everything by touch and sound. Anyways, I'm feeling around for my meds when something small falls off the end table and rolls across the room. I really didn't think anything of it. I was tired and didn't like getting up and feeling around on the floor, so I said screw it and went to sleep. Next morning, my fiancé picks the object up and brings it to me. He tells me that he found it on the floor. It's the ring. Later, Sarah called me and I asked her about it. I thought maybe she had forgotten it. But no, she had absolutely no clue what I was talking about. She said I never let her borrow the ring. She never even saw it. Never said it was pretty. Never mentioned it at all. I thought she was messing with me, but she was serious. It freaked me out so bad, I was honestly speechless. It still has me baffled, and that's been over a week ago. It sounds silly now that I'm typing it out, but I know I remember her asking me about that damn ring. Okay, so my first thought is this could entirely be a prank. To be entirely honest, it could be. The friend could just be messing with you, saying that they never saw it, never spoke about how pretty it was and wanting to borrow it, and they just never took it. You have to leave that on the table that this could be a prank. Although kind of cruel, I would say, because there's no reveal moment, at least not in this story. Maybe later on she did. If she never did, then that drops the odds of it being a prank and just switches it over to DOP. She may have, in fact, this could even be related to her being scared, your friend Sarah being scared. Maybe she did take it, and then you tell her that you have it now, and in her mind, some people just, it's not really close-minded. I think it just, the idea that the universe isn't perfectly orderly, as we're led to believe, or things that we just don't understand yet, that really gives people the heebie-jeebies, certain people. And I don't judge people like that. I think it's perfectly understandable. It is kind of scary when you think about it. Even though when you acclimate to reading so many stories about it, you kind of, it puts your mind at ease. For me, initially, right off the bat, when I started narrating these stories or just reading them on my own before even that, I just enjoyed them. I liked the idea that the universe wasn't as concrete as I previously thought. That's exciting. There's still mysteries, things we don't understand. Cool. But yeah, for some people, they just react negatively to it, and I understand. Especially if it's their first time experiencing anything weird. So, given there's no reaction or reveal to this being a prank, that leads me more towards just terror. Yeah. Often emotions are the biggest clue. Case file number 3363, written by Veritropism, Pipeline 666. When I was 16 or 17, I was a nerdy kid in backwoods Arkansas, hanging out with the slacker and metal kids. We all played D&D together, they all smoked, etc. We did occasional stupid things like pretending to be ninjas in the undeveloped woods and gas pipeline clearing near the trailer park where my best friend lived. One Friday, about 7 of us were sleeping over there, planning to play D&D all day the next day. And one of them suggested going out into that field and doing a pagan circle or some such. I was not a big fan of the idea because at the time, I was still a devout Catholic. I said I'd go and watch but not participate. We hike out into the pipeline clearing, about a quarter mile. They look for a good spot to sit down in a circle and attempt to commute with Mother Nature, I think was the idea. I stay off about 30 feet from them and wait for them to finish, looking past them at the woods beyond and just chilling. They fucking vanished for about 30 seconds. Disappeared completely. Then they pop back up again and come running scared as hell. Apparently they had seen each other as rotting corpses and demons and whatever, and were unable to move for those 30 seconds. I'm Mr. Catholic, so I tried to summon up the power of my faith to protect us all while we hustled back to the trailer with the feeling like we were all being hunted. We got back to the yard, turned to look back at that field. I was mentally doing a "you cannot pass" Gandalf theme to stop the evil spirit from coming at us, and saw nothing obviously menacing. But one little detail I had never noticed before caught all of our eyes at night. The gas pipelines all have these numbered signs on them, angled to be visible from the air or the ground, usually 3 digits. You can probably guess what's happened. This was pipeline 666. We went back out the next day, and the spot they'd been sitting at had no grass on those 6 places at all, but I consider that coincidence. The grass throughout that field was spotty. They'd picked a spot where there was a bit of a cleared area anyway, and they probably picked the spots on a moonless night because they were a smooth spot to sit. I've since gone from Catholic to pagan to atheist, but I can't fully explain that night. The closest thing I can think of is the gas pipeline transporting mescaline instead of methane. Now, speaking of emotions, you get this disturbing scene. Okay, so first off, this can't be a prank, as far as I'm concerned, because you saw everyone vanish for 30 seconds, and then they experienced something too. How would this be coordinated for everyone to vanish, and then everyone else in this group of 6 people or so? They all coordinated a fake story about seeing corpses and demons and all that? I doubt it. And then the pipeline itself being 666. Now, I am not at all religious. I'm not at all well versed in organized religion, Christianity, Catholicism and all that. But to my knowledge, 666 isn't actually representing like the demon or devil or anything. It's 333. But anyways, that's side note. Per the common accepted parlance, it is 666 that is terrifying, that denotes something evil. So just going by colloquialism, things that we commonly accept, it is pretty terrifying. And I'm also curious that you experienced this, something that I couldn't even dream of having experienced anything as remotely as terrifying. For me, it's always just tennis balls vanishing. That's it. That's all that's happened. Or like a Mandela effect where there was a story, an episode of Stargate that I've rewatched the show so many times, and yet there's a new episode I don't remember. Weird. But, those are just minor glitches, things you can kind of brush aside, explain away, not too bad. But anything like deeply supernatural like this, never experienced at all. If something like this happened to me, I wouldn't turn religious, but I would be, okay, I need to evaluate some things. Like, what the hell's going on? Get my Gandalf as you were practicing on. You shall not pass. Case file number 3364, written by Nate 800. Silence thick enough to drown in. I work in a warehouse that my father purchased. He bought it for 25% of its cost from a farmer who seemed very excited to be rid of it. It is in the middle of Mennonite country, with no neighbors for half a mile around. Look out the window. You see cornfields and scraggly trees. Cell service? Forget about it. I work here alone, painting and preparing the front office portion for eventual functionality. To get to the front office, you must go through a hallway from the main warehouse into a secondary office and then through another door into the front. I frequently hear bumps and thuds and occasionally will go into the warehouse and feel air movement, but I've always attributed it to drafts and animal life on the roof. The only thing that has ever made me uneasy about the building is the fact that all the door locks are reversed. Whoever installed those locks didn't intend to keep people out, they intended to keep something in. I was in the front office when I began to hear thudding. I ignored it and continued to apply masking tape to the door I was working on. But this time, it was accompanied by a screeching sound. Not loud, but audible. I was freaked out, but convinced myself that it was just a pissed off raccoon or squirrel that had somehow found its way inside. I continued working until I heard the slam. The door to the secondary office had been open. It sounded like it had violently slammed shut. I peeked around the corner and saw that I was right. The secondary door was now closed. I tried to logic it through my head that a strong draft had sucked it closed, although I knew there was no such draft. The thudding began again, close this time. I've never been able to put a proximity on it, but now it sounded like it was right on the other side of the door. I froze, unsure what was happening. My eyes locked on the door handle, which began to turn. The door disengaged its latch and slowly swung open. Wider, wider. Nothing there. Nothing visible. No air movement. Just quiet. So quiet. A quiet that seemed to overwhelm me with its presence. A quiet so thick I couldn't breathe. The quiet was shattered when the screech came again. This time, it was clearly human. Pained, angered, and emanating from the main warehouse. The door slammed. That entirely broke my frozen, fearful state. I ran. I got into my car and drove until I was in cell range to call my father. He didn't believe anything about the doors closing, but agreed that the building had something weird about it. He told me he'd be right out. Fast forward about a half an hour. My dad and I met up and drove back to the warehouse. I showed him the door that slammed, showing him that it was separated from both the front office and the main warehouse, so no draft could have closed it. I told him about the thuds, the screeching, and the sudden quiet that overcame the building. He decided that he should check the main warehouse. Emboldened by his presence, I led the way. Something you should know about this warehouse. It was formerly a furniture manufacturing place owned by a Mennonite farmer. They made handmade chairs, tables, etc. Because of all the cutting that went on, the floor is thickly coated with dust. We walked into the warehouse and saw nothing out of the ordinary. The dust was untouched, the doors were closed, windows were locked. The only thing out of the ordinary was one of the hanging fluorescent light fixtures. It was hanging askew and swaying slightly. Insisting we take a look at the mount to ensure it didn't just break loose, my dad grabbed a stepladder. He supported it while I climbed up and grabbed a swinging light. I looked up on top of the light and saw a handprint. A single, fresh, inhumanly large handprint. No footprints in the dust around the light, no signs of a presence. I climbed down and switched places with my father. He saw it and said, "What the hell? There's been no one here for years." He climbed down and told me he'd been suspicious of someone breaking in and stealing parts from the warehouse light system. He couldn't believe me that this wasn't human, that something wasn't right here. The last thing he said was, "Nothing is here. Next time just go back to work." And then, as if to show its presence, the thud returned. This time it wasn't just a thud, but more of an earthquake. The entire building felt like it moved. The heartbeat-like thud was then overlaid by the screech. The awful, awful screech. It felt like it was coming from the walls themselves. We ran and I haven't returned. My father hired someone to finish my job and has since moved into the office. He's heard the thudding, but thus far nothing has happened further. What actually happened? I don't know, nor do I ever care to know. What I do know is that there is something paranormal in that building, and the man who sold it to us knew. I'll never forget the sound of that lock turning by itself or the feeling of the deafening silence. Who knew that silence could be so overwhelming? Okay, now just the eeriest damn story. Even this one evokes more eeriness than the last story about pipelines and demons and all rotting corpses. Yeah, that's disturbing. But this one, I think in part is just the handprint, seeing that on the light fixture, but having no footprints. How do you explain that? Unless it's someone that's Mission Impossible, hooking himself to the ceiling and literally just grappling around or something. I don't think anyone would do that, would have the skill and expertise to do that just to steal lights from a warehouse. No. So it definitely strikes me as something being haunted. And then the locks being turned inwards. It does make you think, okay, was someone being held here, captive, died, and is now haunting the place? Yeah, that's a plausible story in my mind. Disturbing indeed. And I mean, if you were in that position, you would just have anger. In whatever fragment that's left over, it would just be fury. Understandable, if misplaced on people that had nothing to do with it, but maybe you don't even process that when you're just in this echo. This blind rage is just lashing out. My daughter diffused my son's repeated 6-7s perfectly. Since my son turned 7 years old, he has picked up the 6-7 meme, presumably from school friends. My daughter turned 4 and innocently assumed 6-7 was something to do with her brother's age, so she responds with 3-4 every time. Her first dad joke without realizing it. I drew Mark Hamill on my sleeping wife's face. You should have seen the look on her face. May the force be with her. I am very conflicted about my right glove. On one hand, I love it. On the other, I hate it. That's good. My neighbor's wife attacked her husband with his guitar collection. At her arraignment, the judge asked, "First offender?" She said, "No, first a Gibson, then a Fender." Why was a snowman digging through a box of carrots? Because he was picking his nose. Gotta select the best looking one. Video up here, YouTube thinks you'll like it, check it out. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. I'll see you next time.